Okay, so on number 1, we start with a decimal, and that decimal 0.15 is read as 15 hundredths because the 5 is in the hundredths place value. So we write 15 hundredths as a fraction, and then that can be simplified. If it ends in a 5 and a 0, we can divide both the top and the bottom by 5. 15 divided by 5 is 3, and 100 divided by 5 is 20. So our simplified fraction would be 3/20. And then if our decimal is 0.15, we need to change our decimal to a percent. So I talked to you about remembering that it's like Dr. Pepper, decimal percent. And Dr. Pepper means you move your decimal 2 times to the right, which is 15%. You can also remember that percents are out of 100, so 15 out of 100 could be our fraction as well, which simplifies to 3/20. And then number 2, we have 5 hundredths. We talked a lot about how this fraction bar is another way of saying that you are dividing. So you could put 5 divided by 100 in your calculator, and you get 0.05, which is also shows you that the 5 is in the hundredths place. And then our percent, if percents are always out of 100, so 5 out of 100 would be 5%. Or again, Dr. Pepper means you move your decimal 2 times to the right, which would be 5%. So then on number 3, we have 67%. It doesn't matter if you change it to a fraction or a decimal first, but if you're changing a percent to a decimal, it's not Dr. Pepper, it's Pepper Doctor. So that means you move your decimal back 2 places to the left, and so 67% would be 0.67, which is 67 hundredths, or 67% means 67 per 100, and that cannot be simplified. And then on the rest of these, we're talking about percent problems, and we've talked about how on every single percent problem, you can always set it up using percent over 100 equals is over of, or on these types of problems. And then when we get to word problems, it's part over whole. There's lots of different ways you can solve these, but this will work every time. So I encourage you to pick out your percent first, so 32%. So we all know that's 32 out of 100. And then it says of 60, so of goes on the bottom, so 60 goes on the bottom. And we're trying to figure out what out of 60 would be equal to 32%. So to solve it in your calculator, you would take cross multiply 32 times 60, divide by 100, which gives us, oh, I forgot my calculator, just a second. (32 times 60 divided by 100 gives us 19.2. So our answer is 19.2 out of 60 would be equal to 32%. So we can plug that back in our calculator to check. 19.2 divided by 60, and we get 0.32, which is 32 hundredths, or 32%. Okay, number 5, we have 275%. Again, we put our percent over 100. A lot of students think if it's over 100%, you have to put it over 1,000, but percents are always out of 100. That's what percent means. Equals of 4, and of goes on the bottom. So we're trying to figure out what out of 4 would be equal to 275%. Okay, 100% would be 4 out of 4. Since we're talking about 275%, our numerator is going to be larger than 4. So we cross multiply 275 times 4, get our answer, divide by 100, and we get an answer of 11. 11 out of 4 would be equal to 275%. Plug it in and check. 11 divided by 4, and you get 2.75, which is 275%. Number 6, this time we don't have a percent. We're trying to figure out the percent out of 100. And then we have 100 of 150, so of goes on the bottom, is 30 goes on the top. So what percent would be equal to 30 out of 150? Cross multiply 30 times 100, get your answer, and divide it by 150, gives you 20. So our answer is 20%. 20 out of 100 would be equal to 30 out of 150. Okay, you can check it. 30 divided by 150, we get 0.2, which is 20 hundredths, or 20%. Okay, number 7, we have 75%, so 75 per 100. Of what number is 24? So is goes on top. We're trying to figure out 24 out of what would be equal to 75 hundredths, or 75%. So we cross multiply 100 times 24, get our answer, divide it by the third number, which is 75, and we get 32. So 24 out of 32 should be equal to 75%. Plug it in and check. 24 divided by 32 equals 0.75, which is 75 hundredths, or 75%. Okay, the next one, no more is or of, we're going to have to use part and whole. It says the drama club held a car wash on Saturday and Sunday. They washed a total of 60 cars. If they washed 40% of the cars on Sunday, how many cars did they wash on Sunday? We know they washed 40%, we just don't know how many actual cars that is. It all depends on the total. Okay, so our percent is 40, so 40% means 40 per 100. Total of 60 cars. Total is whole, so it goes on the bottom. We're trying to figure out how many out of the total of 60 would be equal to 40%. Okay, so we cross multiply. 40 times 60 is 2400. Divide it by 100, and we get 24 cars that they washed on Sunday. 24 out of the total of 60 cars. Okay, divide 24 divided by 60 to check. We get 0.4, which is 40 hundredths. Okay. Then the back, we have Peyton spent 60% of her money to buy a new television. If the television cost $300, how much money did she have to start with? So our percent, 60% means 60 per 100. The television cost $300, so now we have to decide, is that part of the money or all of her money? And so we need to think about what it's asking. It says, how much money did she have to start with? Well, she's going to start with more money than what the television costs, because it tells us right here that she spent 60% of her money on the television. So the television would be part of her money. So part goes on top. We're trying to figure out how much money she had to start with, which goes on the bottom. So we cross multiply 300 times 100, divide it by 60, and we get $500. So she started with $500, and she spent 60% of that on the television, which was $300. If you would have put 300 on the bottom, you would have cross multiplied here and divided by 100 and gotten $180, and that just doesn't make sense. She wouldn't start with $180 if the television cost $300. Okay, so the last one, we have a circle graph. It's titled snacks, so you can see all the snacks. We know that all of our percentages on a circle graph have to add up to 100%. It says if 54 of the snacks that were chosen were chips, how many total snacks were chosen? So if we look down here at chips, chips was 18%. 18%, 18 out of 100. Okay, 54 of those were chips. Chips are part of this graph, so it's going to go on top. And our total, the whole thing, is going to go on the bottom. We're trying to figure out 54 out of what, out of our total, would be equal to the 18% chips. So we cross multiply 100 times 54, divide it by 18, and we get 300 total snacks. Okay, so chips, cookies, veggies, all of that total should be equal to 300 total snacks. If you want some more practice, again, there's iExcel skills I-10, I-11, I-12, I-13, S2, and then S5 through S10 would be good practice.